If you're enjoying the Trees and Lines podcast, please head over to our Trees and Lines LinkedIn page and give us a follow. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of the Trees and Lines podcast. Sara Race, Senior Manager of Environmental Management at ComEd, joins us to talk about their environmental impact, their native prairie habitat program, and how they are enabling pollinator habitats. Have a listen. Hope you enjoy. Well, welcome, Sara. Appreciate your joining us on Trees and Lines.
Thank you.
Why don't you start us off today by telling us a little bit about Sara Race?
Sure. So I have been in the environmental field most of my career. I started off in the nonprofit sector and then moved when I was in graduate school as an intern to ComEd. And I have been here ever since, about 20 plus years in the environmental department. I am now the senior manager of the environmental department of Commonwealth Edison. So I manage about 15 plus people. We have a interesting department that it's partially environmental coordinators who are our field presence, some program personnel, and then 2 project managers.
Okay, very good. So how big is the ComEd asset that you're managing or that you're working on?
Yeah, ComEd is a pretty big utility. We're part of the Exelon Corporation, but ComEd is all of Northern Illinois. I think we have about 6,000 employees at ComEd. Our territory, again, ranges from all of Chicago and all the way west, almost to the Mississippi.
A couple of your specific programs caught my eye, but, you obviously have an environmental passion. You look out over that huge asset. What, as an environmentalist, do you see?
I think the biggest thing that I see, which I know we'll talk further about, is that ComEd is unique in that we own a lot of land in Illinois. Many utilities actually don't own the land. They just have easements, which we do as well. But I would say we own a majority. So we're one of the largest landowners in Illinois. And so I think we have a unique opportunity to really look at our land and how we treat it and what we can do in the sense of being a neighbor to a lot of our customers and what kind of conservation work we can do on some of these properties.
So what you do is on both owned land and the easements, or?
Yeah, but typically we try to focus on property that we own just because we know that we have full control of it. But there have been opportunities, sometimes partnerships, where if we have an easement and the partner is interested, we have done those. But generally speaking, I would say the majority of efforts where conservation or biodiversity efforts are on property that ComEd owns. For the audience,
because the word environmental is a big word. And when I think of it, I think of things like carbon neutrality and carbon mitigation and permitting and dealing with water issues, et cetera. So in terms of what you guys specifically focus on and what your scope is, can you maybe frame that for us?
Sure. To really, I guess, sum it up very simplistically, we generally think about it as air, water, and land. So we have programs and have to manage all of that for ComEd. Ultimately, our department is a compliance-based department, meaning that we have to make sure that the company is in compliance with all environmental laws and regulations. And environmental laws can be at the municipal level, the county level, the state level, and the federal level. So we have to ensure we develop programs to make sure that we can kind of simplify these laws so that we can talk to overhead crews, underground crews, transmission crews, so that they understand what they have to do in the field to comply with those. I'd say about 15% of our programs, and that's a high level, are beyond. We try to be beyond compliance in all of our programs, but we have some programs that have nothing to do with compliance, but are solely focused on just doing what's right and what's good for the company and what's good for our land. So we consider that like stewardship programs.
How much of your regulation is managed at the federal level?
I would say most of our day-to-day work is really at the local level. Is due to, if you're familiar with the Chicagoland area, we have counties, and these counties have really taken environmental laws seriously, especially stormwater, wetlands, and have made our standards very strict. So if you look at the whole country, I would say Illinois has some of the tightest regulations around. Some of our OPCOs out east, they have some tight ones dealing with the Chesapeake Bay area. So there are, of course, other areas that have strict ones, but I would say Illinois is very strict compared to other Midwest states.
Okay, that's interesting. The reason I bring that up is it's the top of every news cycle currently with what the current administration is doing, with federal-based agencies. So what sort of impacts have you guys seen when it comes to, what I guess the next few years look like, and how have you adjusted for that in terms of how you are managing your compliance, whether it's self-regulated or driven by, a regulatory agency?
Yeah, it's a good question. And typically we do get these questions internally even. And I will tell you that because administration changes every 4 years, we typically do not change. So, the current administration is really trying to deregulate. And so, and obviously there's a lot of litigation around the deregulation. We currently are kind of hold on what was in place prior, and will continue kind of a conservative approach unless the laws really change. And at this point, much has not changed. And generally speaking, again, we still have a very conservative platform in the sense that we want to be above and beyond compliance and be good stewards and make sure that we, our whole platform for our company is really about, climate resiliency and becoming, electrical. So I think, I don't think that's changing at this point at all.
So much of my time is spent on things you have to do on the right of way. I'm curious about the 15% you get to do. Can you tell some of the programs that?
Yeah, and I can tell you that when I was hired as an intern 20 plus years ago, I was specifically hired to write the first biodiversity plan for ComEd. And so since then, we have really flourished, in my opinion, on kind of what we've done in that arena. So at a high level, I'll just tell you, we do a lot regarding native habitat here. And the native habitat in Illinois is, basically prairies, wetlands, and woodlands. Our focus has really been on prairies because that really goes hand in hand with the transmission rights of way and with our habitat, as well as there's only 0.01% of prairies left in Illinois. So there's been a huge issue with the amount of habitat that's around. And so we've really 20 years ago, even before that, we started installing prairies. And so we've created a standard of what's kind of okay as a prairie, what would stand up in front of other conservation agencies, and we can add prairies every year. So right now we have over 45 sites, over 600 acres of prairie, which may not sound a lot, but it is a lot because you have to maintain them every year. And it's a lot more expensive in the sense, to have a certain high quality than just mowing a right of way.
So do you work closely with the operations group?
You mean like vegetation management? We work with actually the whole company. So our department, has to support everybody in the company, from vegetation management for like, if an endangered species becomes listed, which we can talk about the monarch, or we work with operations if they have to get permits, if they're doing work or maintenance that are in areas that are wetlands. So yeah, it ranges the gamut. So we work with the whole company depending on what's the need.
Okay, you mentioned the monarch. You are part of that monarch. You have a monarch conservation agreement, am I correct?
You are correct. We have a candidate conservation agreement with assurances. We signed on a few years ago when we had that opportunity. As you may know, it sounds like the University of Illinois Chicago is the permittee and issues certifications of inclusion. So we are one of those. And I will tell you that we've won 4 awards from UIC based on all of our monitoring. We have done an extensive amount of monitoring compared to others that are part of it, but we felt like it was a no-brainer to join on, knowing that, again, the monarch was going to be listed. We wanted to support that, and we really tried to incorporate it into our current programs and our current vegetation management cycles.
Do you have other pollinator programs going?
Yeah, that's one main one. I would say the other one is the Prairie program, because obviously monarchs and prairies, host a whole bunch of species, native species, because it's such high quality habitat. So that would be our main one, is our prairies. We also have, we work with a lot of partners like the Illinois Nature Preserve Commission, the local forest preserve districts. We also work with the Conservation Foundation to help host schools, and they run the Mighty Acorns program, which is a curriculum-based program all about restoration. And so we actually get schools involved. They walk to the transmission corridor. They plant native plants or seeds. They help make sure that the invasives get removed, and they learn about kind of what we're doing and what ComEd is doing. In addition, we have a grants program at ComEd. It's an open lands, helps administer this grant program. And we've had a pollinator focus for many years, as well as climate resiliency. We've given away, 7 figures over the years. It's typically smaller grants, $10,000 grants. But we've given many, many out over the past many years. And I would say lastly, we do have a couple areas where we have honeybee hives. And although they're not native, they do really support pollination in the area.
Since, you touch different organizations in the group, asset managers, people that are, focused on the reliability, contractors, internal ComEd groups, I have to imagine there are probably various moments where there's like some level of healthy conflict in terms of satisfying a reliability objective and staying within compliance, whether it's self-regulated or regulated. Like, maybe can you paint a picture for us of some of those moments and how the organization works through that and how they prioritize getting the work done in a way that satisfies your internal goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love how you say healthy conflict. 'Cause I think there is a lot of it. And generally speaking, when environmental is involved, they know it potentially is going to cost a project more money and more time. So it is definitely, there is some resistance at times. I can give you probably a lot of examples, but I would say that, Exelon has a environmental policy and compliance is the minimum. So generally speaking, we do have some backing in the sense that we know that we have to maintain compliance. And so if there's an endangered species in the area, they either are going to have to switch the time frame of that, when we're doing the work, or they're going to have to put other things in order. So it will cost the project more money or more time. And we try to work with the project manager to say, which would you choose? How do you want us to do this? We work really closely with regulators and have made sure that we kind of maintain positive relationships with our regulators. But yeah, I think there's lots of healthy conflict with not only the projects and project managers, but also, our other operating groups.
I'm assuming you have a peer group at each of the other companies like Baltimore Gas Electric, and is that true?
Yes. We have an environmental peer group, as well as we have peer groups based on content, as well as our operating, like construction and maintenance, they have peer groups. So yes, there's multiple peer groups at all of the OPCO levels.
And then everything, so you guys report up into what group at Exelon? Is there just an Exelon environmental leadership team?
There is. And then there's a sustainability group. And so it used to all be one. And I would say 2 years ago, it got changed. So we have a sustainability group and an environmental, and we kind of work with both very closely.
Is Exelon ISO, 9,000?
No, it's actually 14,001 certified.
14,000, sorry.
Yeah, we are certified. And again, that's another unique thing for Exelon as well as ComEd. We have been certified since 2008. And the main thing about ISO 14,001 certification is the focus is really about continuous improvement and minimizing environmental risk. And so for a long, long time, obviously, we work with any group that impacts the environment to help them understand how they can impact the environment, what they do, and how we can minimize it, how we can get more procedures in place, what we can do from a cost-effective basis and an operational basis to minimize our environmental risk. And it has been effective, and I think we need to continue to find ways to ensure that it's fun, it's new, and it remains effective.
What's something, Sara, that you feel is still a big challenge that you guys continue to have to deal with, and you're trying to still figure out a solve for, at least in your world? It could be at the ComEd level. It could be just more industry wide. What is something that kind of keeps you thinking and continuing to work and aim to improve?
One of our real big focus is, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And because we're not a generating, company, we don't actually emit a lot comparatively, but we still have a goal to really diminish and, be basically carbon neutral by 2050. And so it's a big challenge. And I think what's been a challenge is we've made we've made some commitments, but may not have the budget behind all those commitments. So it's trying to kind of backtrack and work towards, so how are we going to kind of put our money where our mouth is and ensure that we have dollars to make these infrastructure changes that will get us to meet our goals in the future? And there's some. One is specifically, like, if you're familiar with SF6, or it's called sulfur hexafluoride. It's gas that's in our breakers, and it has a large greenhouse gas emission if it leaks. Luckily, technology has minimized how much it leaks now. And there are some companies that build breakers that are starting to look at different technologies, but for us to get that new technology on system is going to take years. And so it's working on how do we get things to move faster so that we can kind of hopefully meet our goals in time and still kind of be a lead utility in the environmental arena.
When the technology is not there, or there's not an alternative solution, is the backup plan basically maybe buy offsets, or like is that how you guys sort of in the interim solve for carbon neutrality?
At this point, no. Up to 2030, we're not using offsets at all. But starting after 2030, as long as it meets the accounting standards, we are looking to see how can we do that. Okay. We still look at them kind of behind the scenes, but right now we're not looking at offsets. But we do believe like our Prairie program can offer offsets. We keep track for that purpose. We believe it sequesters carbon. If you know anything about prairies, the plants are 90% underground versus above ground, and so they really sequester carbon. They help with stormwater. There's so many benefits that we think we could capture both carbon as well as other things from those prairies. That's why we continue to expand and add to them.
So as you look across the industry, you must work with other electric utilities out there. Are they in the same place? Your peers probably have the same passion, the same desire. Are the utilities supporting them in the same way, do you think?
I will, identify that I think ComEd is unique for two reasons. One is we, again, own property where a lot of our sister utilities don't, and they just have easements. And the other is that this program is really, it's been around for a long time, so it's mature. And based on that, we're the only utility that I'm aware of that does control burning, for maintenance of these prairies. And again, that can be a touchy subject now with fires, obviously, but we are really mature and advanced compared to other utilities from my perspective. There are some companies that really do a lot for vegetation management and have very savvy programs, but our vegetation management program is savvy as well as then this is kind of an addition.
The application of like herbicide, right, to manage right-of-ways, right? You've got people utilizing chemicals that are, spraying on your system. How much do they have to work through you or get your approval before people can touch assets or get on your system? Like, how involved are you as the regulator of non-ComEd entities?
It's a great question. So we solely contract all of that work out, both on the veg side and the environmental side. And there are requirements by law in Illinois that if you're going to be spraying herbicides, that you need to have a license, et cetera. So obviously anybody that's going to be doing that is expected to be properly licensed and properly trained. And then beyond that, we do have a permit that we submit annually. Our vegetation management department is great. They know what they need to do. They know what they keep track of. They know what herbicides are allowed where. So certain herbicides aren't allowed in what areas, et cetera. So they keep track of all that, and we ensure that we're in compliance that way. Herbicides, as you can imagine, is definitely a touchy subject with customers. But for environmental purposes, like for prairie restoration, we have to use them. I mean, there's other mechanisms like mowing and fire, but herbicides is definitely the best method. And you would ask other conservation agencies, they would agree with that. So I don't think we're doing anything different than anybody else. It's just making sure that we're using the right ones. We also don't just like broadcast spray everywhere. We're making sure we're being really methodical about where and how we're spraying.
What do you think is the biggest misconception of the kind of work that you do by less informed people that are impacted by, the environmental side of things? But, when you walk into meetings or you end up dealing and engaging with different partners and different stakeholders, like what tends to be the biggest misconception when you're working with the different stakeholders when trying to accomplish something?
Wow, that's a great question.
Good question.
Yeah. And I would say for large projects, one thing that we've done is we actually get third parties, other conservation agencies to speak up on our behalf. So thus, again, not like basically ones that we have relationships with. So there's lots of integrity there that they're speaking up on our behalf, knowing that, hey, ComEd is doing this. They really do this. They're walking the walk. And I'd say the one thing I wish customers would know that people don't know is how much we actually do for the environment on the positive side. I think most people don't understand that. They don't understand why we're doing vegetation management, why we're putting out milkweed seeds, why we restore to prairies, nor do they know how much we do. And so for me, I think the biggest thing would be how do we get that messaging out? And we work with our communications department closely, but it would be great to have, newspaper articles talking about all the positive things that ComEd does. It's not so easy as you can imagine, but that's to me is the one misnomer, I think, from our customers. To answer your question more specifically, I think that's a really hard question. And I think we really try to be transparent and honest with customers so that they can help better understand our constraints and what solutions we can come to the table with that will meet their satisfaction as well.
Maybe asking it a little bit of a different way. Let's say theoretically, like I took away your group, right? There's no more environmental group. Those 15 people are no longer doing what they do. Describe what the world would look like inside of the utility. Like, what would happen?
Chaos.
Oh, right. But I mean, environmentally, like, what does I think this is where maybe people have a difficult time. And I say this very generally, but like, sometimes, when they hear like biodiversity and they hear environmental impacts and permitting and looking at water and, planting these seeds, like if you didn't do any of those things from a environmental risk perspective or from an asset risk perspective, like paint a picture of what would happen. Like, what are you mitigating that's protecting us, and how can we quantify the benefits of that?
That's a great question. I will tell you, one of the things that's challenging about the environmental world is very difficult to quantify. A lot of times it is not quantifiable by dollars. It's what we're getting for it. But I can paint a picture in the sense that I think there would be a lot of waste placed places where we would get complaints. I think customers would complain a lot more because they don't realize what we're doing. You would find spoil piles places. You would find us driving through wetlands. You would find us impacting endangered species. So I think, it's a great, I've never actually looked at it that way of what, we look at our risk all the time, but I don't think we think of like, if we took the whole department away, what that would look like. And it could actually be chaos. We could be emitting a lot more. We could be spilling and leaking a lot more. One of, 5 people in my department are solely there for basically spill and release mitigation and ensuring that anytime a transformer spills, that we clean it up within a certain time frame and we clean it up properly. So think about that. If we didn't have that, we would be potentially spilling, transformers or oil. It could be I would say chaos.
And Illinois would have no native prairie lands.
I don't know about no, but very minimal. It would be a lot less, yeah.
Where do you think the U.S. utility world ranks against the rest of the world? Like, do you guys benchmark? I'm sure you benchmark against other peer utilities here in the United States, but is there someone else in the world that you guys look at and say, these guys are ahead or they're setting the standard? Like, what's the world look like in this kind of sector field?
In my grad school, I will tell you, I did do a lot of benchmarking regarding kind of ComEd versus other companies. And I will stand here after 20 years and say we have a very environmentally conscious company. And I think our, all the way up to our executives, they care about the environment, they care about the environmental impact, and they know that if we had a huge release in a river, that would impact our reputation. I mean, ISO 14001 solely lays that kind of scenario out of like, what will happen to your reputation? What will happen to fines and violations? And so I think we have always been a risk adverse company and would want to maintain that only because we work and live in the areas that, with our customers. So we work hand in hand, in neighborhoods where we live. And so we want to make sure we're really good neighbors. I think there are areas of improvement, though. If you look at other companies worldwide, I'm sure there's more sustainable opportunities that we could take. Some from our infrastructure. So, we have a lot of reporting centers. So I'm sure we could look at our infrastructure and see how we can make them more energy efficient, which we are doing. But that's one area. We could put native landscaping at all of our sites, which again, we do on our rights of way. But that's one of my goals is how do we do that at all of our facilities so we can model it so that our employees can take that home. When we have storms and people work all over the territory, we're not necessarily tracking how far people are driving. There's ways that I think we could do better regarding our own personal emissions and our own personal greenhouse gas, ways that we could mitigate that further. I definitely want to think about that question more. It's a really good one.
So you have about 20 years of executive support for this notion. So any advice to your peers on, what do you attribute to that to?
It's a good question. And I will tell you, when I started here 20 years ago as an intern, I remember thinking, it's not going to be real. The support's not going to be real. And it genuinely was, and it genuinely still is. So I guess how I typically say it is, don't be scared of your executives. They put their pants on the same way we do. And if you tell them the story so that they understand it and they understand the impacts, like Tej said, like if you took it away, what would happen? I think, again, if they are reasonable people, they will understand and support programs. And when you look at overall budgets, the budget for our department and kind of what we're doing is very, very small compared to kind of our whole budget just to, run and operate. So, but we do a lot of really, really good and meaningful things that impact our community. So I guess I would say be reasonable and try to break it down, and don't be fearful, and get your advocates, get your sponsors. So there's always a sponsor or two that is an executive that would be more interested in it.
But over 20 years, you've maintained it over many executives, I'm guessing.
So, oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would be interested if we actually interviewed them to see what they would say. But generally, my consensus is that our executives do support our environmental program all the way up to the top.
Sara, is your budget factored into like the OpEx? And does that ultimately get, is that part of the PUC negotiation, or is it more part of a capital program and environmental related dollars are amortized over a longer period? Like, how does your budget impact a ratepayer?
I will tell you that we have, 2 project managers, and their sole focus is to remediate old manufactured gas plant sites that we were involved in. That is all, knock on wood, recoverable, or has been recoverable for many years. Our typical O&M budget is budgeted just like anything else that we're doing, and it does go through the Illinois Commerce Commission and get approved. And then there are items that are capitalized depending on the project. So if we're, buying a new site and it's contaminated, we will clean it up as part of our project. And so some of these items are capitalized, some of them are not. The nuances are very complicated, but we have our hands in all of it, I would say.
Oh, very cool. Okay. We really appreciate you carving out some time for us today. This gave us a real good understanding, kind of top to bottom, left to right, about all the areas you impact. And, congratulations on what seems to be a continuously successful career at ComEd. And you guys are having great impact, seem to be leading the space. And this was a super interesting conversation. We really enjoyed it.
Were there any topics or things you wanted to highlight or mention that we forgot to bring up?
We have a really savvy bird program that I would just mention, where we are proactive and we do helicopter surveys every 5 years to find out where our eagle nests are and our osprey nests, so that we can proactively ensure that the lines around there are avian safe. But I would say I'd like to leave you with that, as big of a company as we are, that we do care about the environment. The people that work in my department are super passionate, and there's many people outside of our department that care about the environment, and I think has attributed to our success.
That's great. Well, Sara, I felt like we just got started. There's so much more to talk about, but maybe we can dig into something, one of these topics, and go a little deeper on a future episode. But really appreciate you making the time today and talking to us a little bit about what ComEd's doing on the environmental side. It was great to learn a little bit about your background as well. So thank you very much.
Very interesting.
It's nice to meet both of you, and happy to see how this goes and see kind of, what the response is. And if we do want to dive deeper, happy to do that.
Yeah,
okay.
That'd be great.
Very good.
That'd be great.
I do appreciate you taking the time, Sara.
Yeah,
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
good luck.
That's it for this episode of Trees and Lines, brought to you by Iapetus Holdings. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.